Hurricane Idalia roared ashore in Florida, making landfall in the Big Bend region just before 8 a.m. Wednesday as a powerful Category 3 hurricane. The latest path took Idalia through Georgia and into the Carolinas with life-threatening storm surges.
Our sheriff has just asked everyone to stay put, stay off of the roads, and until they can clear some of these big trees. And then the other thing for me is I have not been out of my driveway because we have a lot of pine trees and oak trees down in our yard. It looks like a disaster zone from what the pictures that I'm receiving and from the calls that I'm getting. As you said, it looks like a war zone in town.
Russian state media has released rare footage showing Paul Whelan inside a notorious prison camp.
U.S. officials have spoken with Paul within the last several months. I think, as you all know that, but it was reassuring to see that he remains, and this is to use his brother's words, unbowed. Paul continues to show tremendous courage. That does not change that his circumstances are truly unacceptable.
Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis, in a filing Tuesday, reiterated her desire for all 19 defendants charged in her Georgia election interference case to stand trial together.
Willis submitted the filing subsequent to Judge Scott McAfee's order for defendant Kenneth Chesebro to face trial on October 23rd. This decision followed Chesebro's request for an expedited trial. Additionally, former President Donald Trump's legal team informed the court of their intention to request a separation of the cases. Lawrence Keller reporting.
The search on land for further victims of the deadly wildfires in Maui is essentially complete, officials told reporters.
Although there is a list of 388 individuals unaccounted for, posted on August 24th, authorities anticipate only marginal growth in the death toll during the concluding phases of the search. Haley White reporting.
This is the latest news headlines. Police in the northern Texas city of Allen found 4 people dead Monday in what investigators say was an apparent murder-suicide.
Police indicated that the fatalities were apparently due to a murder-suicide. However, they did not promptly release the identities or ages of the deceased, nor did they provide additional particulars about the incident. Kyle Norris reporting.
Myron Burrell, who was sent to prison for life as a teenager but was set free after 18 years behind bars, was arrested in Minneapolis suburb Tuesday after police said they found a handgun and drugs in his SUV.
Burrell was taken into custody and booked at the Hennepin County Jail under suspicion of possessing a handgun as a prohibited person. Although formal charges had not been filed, police mentioned the potential addition of charges related to driving while intoxicated and drug possession. Kevin Sanders reporting.
Late last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention signaled it expects to have an updated COVID vaccine available by mid-September, along with the likely recommendation that everyone should get the latest booster shot.
This announcement coincided with a release of CDC data on Monday, indicating a 6th consecutive week of increasing COVID-related hospitalizations. Hospitalizations surged by 18.8% for the week ending August 19th, a pattern reminiscent of levels observed in April. Michael Wallace reporting.
The Biden administration announced the initial slate of 10 prescription medicines chosen as a part of the first-ever price negotiations between Medicare and the nation's pharmaceutical giants.
The medications listed are among the most common and expensive prescriptions that treat a range of conditions such as heart failure, blood clots, diabetes, arthritis, Crohn's disease, and more, Biden stated in a communique heralding the commencement of the highly anticipated initiative. Clara Hudson reporting.
And that's the latest news headlines. I'm Alan Edwards.
I'm Rich Rosario. 1 in 4 heart attack survivors will have another cardiovascular event. Award-winning author and American Heart Association volunteer Dr. Nisa Goldberg explains the hidden risks.
Many people don't realize that managing hidden risks like untreated high blood pressure, unhealthy eating habits, and poor medication adherence may reduce your risk for having another heart attack.
The American Heart Association's Secondary Heart Attack Prevention Initiative, sponsored by Bayer, reminds you to follow your doctor's recommendations to help reduce your risk factors.
Take your medication as prescribed. Certain medicines like aspirin can lower your risk of another cardiac event. Aspirin is not appropriate for everyone, so be sure to talk to your doctor before you begin an aspirin regimen. It's important to understand your medications and take them correctly. Manage risk factors like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Quit smoking, eat healthier, and get active.
Learn more ways to thrive after a heart attack at heart.org/oneisenough.
Hi, I'm Karen, owner of Lone Star Transfer. If you are a timeshare owner, getting out is probably a top priority. And now that annual maintenance fees are coming due, this ongoing burden and expense is at the top of your list. Thankfully, we can help. Let us do for you what we have done for thousands of others across the country. Our process is done legally, ethically, and quickly. Lone Star Transfer has a 99% success rate and an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. We are a family-owned business and will personally make sure your experience is a pleasant one. Don't let another day go by with maintenance fees taking your hard-earned money. Give us a call for a no-obligation consultation at 844-284-4863. That's 844-284-4863 or online at lonestartransfer.com. That's lonestartransfer.com.
Is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America together in
12 and where we have come. There was a case to be made for coming together. And I look back now in 1988 where Jesse Jackson and Mike Dukakis were fighting each other for the Democratic nomination. And now, less than 30 years later, we are both here for the first African-American president. And I want to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Reverend Jackson, how important it is to see that.
Well, first of all, Governor Dukakis deserves lots and lots of praise he and Kitty because the tensions were very high and the campaign remained civil. After all, the idea of an African American being on that stage debating domestic and foreign issues and people struggling for advantage to get votes, Michael Dukakis never went down there. He kept the campaign on a high moral plane. Unfortunately, that is not happening now. The idea that they're calling President Barack a liar, you're not born here, you're not an American, you're not a Christian. This is a revival of the lowest of our politics, and that must be rejected in November 6 as well.
Governor, you have seen this on the Republican side. We have come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
Well, I think that's true, Jeff. Jesse and I ran with a very interesting field of rather familiar names. Joe Biden was one of them. Al Gore was another. Dick Gephardt was another. Heath Babbitt was another. Paul Simon. But I don't remember, Jesse, any of this down and dirty stuff in our primary campaign. I mean, I think we respected each other.
Trying to make the country better. We were working on that. And political leaders must never forget the burden they have to keep people above their fears, not to reinforce their fears.
Remember, Jeff, at the time we were in the last year or two of the Reagan era, there was a lot of polarization. I mean, people kind of think back and say everything was great because he and Tip used to have a beer at 6 o'clock at night. It was not great. There was an enormous amount of polarization and division at the time, and I think all of us were very much aware of this and trying very hard to see if we couldn't take that campaign up a bit. But I think, Jesse, we all respected each other. You know, we had all been doing the public's business for a long time and trying our best to make a contribution. And I often said, I never listened to Jesse speak. And how many debates did we have? About 45. I never listened to him speak without learning something. And I mean that. There was always something about what he said that was well worth listening to and learning from. And I think all of us kind of felt that way. Is that the case today? No, I think Jesse's right.
I think that the tent has gotten more narrow. Yeah. And even now, even this is the way.
All right, we are back live. It is the Jeff Santos Show. We apologize for the technical problems, but it's great to be with you today on this Thursday edition of the Jeff Santos Show. not sure if any of you heard the introduction, but basically we are going to be doing 2 hours today. Herb Boyd will start us off at 3:12 p.m. today. A great journalist, Amsterdam News, of course. We'll look back at the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. And Mr. Boyd has written about this and is talking to many people who were there. Coming up at 3:33, John Nichols writing a lot on the campaign, Donald Trump, and the Republican lies and liars that are there, and also about Bernie Sanders, who we get to see on Sunday for Aaron Regenberg. We're going to have the candidate running for Congress for David Cicilline's seat coming up at 4:06 today for about 5 minutes. He's an impressive candidate endorsed by both Bernie Sanders and AOC. That should tell you something if you're a progressive and wanting to see the numbers increase for the Progressive Caucus and the squad come next year, or whenever this, I guess, be actually this year, because the election will take place in November and in the general. And I think he could actually take office before January because it's a special election. So we'll see about that. Next, we will also be chatting with our great friends Larry Korb and Brian Garvey coming up at about 4:20 p.m. Garvey, of course, Mass Peace Action Deputy Director. Mass Peace Action is a sponsor of the Jeff Santos Show. And, of course, Senior Fellow, former Vietnam vet, and, of course, a part of the Reagan administration, Deputy Defense Secretary Larry Korb will join us at about 4:20 to about 4:40. We'll wrap it up with Patrick Claybon of the NFL Network. He, of course, is our fantastic NFL correspondent, if you might. And, of course, a lot of issues on the social agenda, too, which we get into with him when we have a chance to talk with Patrick. All right, with that, let's start it off in a fantastic discussion and to I think, have an opportunity to talk about the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington back on August 28th. That was Monday. And Herb Boyd has a lot of thoughts on this, and he joins us now on the telephone. Herb, great to have you back, my friend. How are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Well, it is so cool to talk to you. I had a chance to watch a little video of you. I'm not sure if that was local CBS or what the affiliate was, but it's great to see you on TV. And nonetheless, and used to be getting more attention. I'm going to ask you to start off with here to kind of take us back to that incredible march. You know, there are a lot of people involved, at the NAACP, SNCC. Of course, John Lewis spoke. There was a lot of, problems with his speech with the Kennedy administration. They wanted him to back the civil rights bill that would eventually become the LBJ bill after Kennedy was assassinated. And then, of course, you have, a lot of people involved. A. Philip Randolph was a big part of it, too. Your thoughts on this? We look back now and what was important then and what resonates today.
Well, one of the things about this, and we always talk about, past as prologue.
Right.
And you couldn't have a better example than the celebration anniversary of this historic march on Washington back in 1963, because many of the issues that they proposed at that time, although the central concerns as part of the top of the advertisement and promotion was jobs and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But
right.
I think it was far more expansive than that when you got down to hearing different speakers and everything, and certainly Bayard Rustin, who was pretty much the architect of the whole event. And of course, that has a history too, going back to his affiliation relationship with A. Philip Randolph back in 1941, when they threatened a march on Washington then. And of course, that brought about the 8801 and the discrimination in the industries, the armed industries at that time. Of course, and that opened the doors for my mother to get a job, more or less, working in the arsenal of democracy, as they called Detroit at that time, because of the shifting plants and putting together war, the armaments and whatever for the war. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that part too.
So anyway, yeah. But the key thing here, though, Jeff, is that we are talking about the ongoing presence of racial and gender disparity in our society. And those concerns obviously was raised in so many different ways. And as you made reference to, my appearance on CBS was to kind of contextualize the march, to talk about some of the high points of it, as well as some of the controversy. And you mentioned one in terms of John Lewis's speech, which of course A. Philip Randolph, who was a real anti-communist, and anybody he could smell a communist a mile away. So he was saying he says he was saying like, okay, let's tone down this speech, because in the speech John Lewis was making reference to some of the terminology that's connected to the left at that time, certainly with the Communist Party, talking about the masses and revolution. So
Right.
A. Philip Randolph would say, go back and redo this speech. And he did so with the help of Cortland Cox and James Foreman, the late James Foreman. And they quickly put it together. But even with that, though, Jeff, John managed to squeeze in a couple of those things, indicate the militarism, the radical aspects of the younger members, at that time, SNCC in particular. So they had some concerns, and he put them forth, and they got through. It was too late. There's nothing you could do about it. It was already done. And of course, the other concern was the speech itself that Dr. King delivered. And that was the thing that I gave some discussion to based upon my interview with Clarence Jones, who was the attorney for Dr. King. And he was there. He had the script that Dr. King had was written by Clarence Jones principally, along with Dr. King. But when he was reading it pretty well, he got to the kind of like a pause in there, and Mahalia Jackson, the great gospel singer, she was in the audience, and obviously, she had heard the speech before when she called out, "Tell him about the dream, Martin, tell him about the dream." And that's when he went off script and began to talk about a speech that he had given previously back in June in Detroit, because there was a march in Detroit, kind of a dress rehearsal, a dry run for the historic moment in August. So that's when he delivered that famous speech, and was mostly at the urging, of Mahalia Jackson for him to go ahead and do that. Otherwise, he probably would just stayed on script. So they had the kind of interaction that was a very significant part of our history that a number of people have no knowledge of, and just only recently, I know when after I did the show and was talking to some people who were in the studio, 4 or 5 of them say, "What? We never knew anything about that." They just took it for granted that was the speech, and it was well prepared, but that was improvisational at its best. And of course, King was good on and off script.
Well, exactly. And, you couldn't ask for a better, more emotional and inspirational speaker than the great Martin Luther King. But one of the things we talk here on the Jeff Santos show on this Thursday in the month of August, our last day in August here, I think about, the fact that, they understood that they had TV cameras there. And back in those days, 3 major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and the attention would be what is it going to be? What are going to be the news highlights? If you can remember, was it televised live, or did they take the tape of it, going forward, Herb?
I think as I remember, it was like, I don't know if they did the whole thing. I think they did the run up to it, and then I don't know if the stations were ready, prepared to do the covering of the entire, because it was like a day long affair.
Right,
So
exactly.
you have to
Yeah,
find
exactly.
moments to zip in there. So, but I think they got the highlights of it on the evening news. Yes.
Fascinating. Much different than today, where you
Mm.
can watch it on YouTube or C-SPAN or whatever the case may be. Taking
Yeah.
Pastor's Pro on your perspective here, and I want to get to a call from John in Minnesota in a minute. Do you think that the young people, folks at Beyond Black Lives Matter, you compare that to SNCC, going back 60 years ago? Is there a comparison? I saw Sharpton give a great speech and so forth, and um, uh, the fact that he would make the decision on the phonies and the dreamers, the schemers, I think as he called it, and the dreamers. Um,
Yeah.
do you
Right.
think that the BLM folks are connected, historically to what SNCC was going through back then? Because a lot of people don't necessarily want to hear from Black Lives Matters within some elements of the Democratic Party and within some elements of even the progressive community. Although I think that is now a lot more diminished than it was, say, several years ago.
Well, so much of it depends on what audience are we talking about,
Sure.
because the division in this country is markedly there. I mean, you
Oh, no
cannot
doubt.
dispute
The right
that.
wing, that's a whole
Yeah.
different world.
Yeah, in the African American community, you're going to have always these concerns, these differences from an ideological, political standpoint, and whether it's not progressive enough, too progressive, too black, not black enough. We've had that ongoing discussion, but I would think that even if you go back and look at it in 1963, it was amazing that we had that kind of a turnout then, because the civil rights movement itself was not that a large of a formation. And we talk
That's
about,
true.
like, if you look at some of the students, at the time when I was in college, and if you're up north, you had a different perspective on what was happening in the South. It was only after it began to really get the kind of exposure on television. I think the March on Washington did as much as anything to give the movement beyond even the Emmett Till. I mean, it had to be on television. It had to be in the media in order to get the kind of exposure to get more people involved. Otherwise, it was a very, very small movement of dedicated people, young students, just SNCC. I mean, how many members in SNCC? I don't think they had 100 members in SNCC.
Wow.
But it was very, very. They were very, very. That small cadre, was a significant cadre of thinkers, and I think James Foreman talked about it in the making of Black Revolutionaries, in terms of how just a small force, small number of them were courageous and brave enough to go down there and. I mean, going up against the Ku Klux Klan, and after they started killing them left and right, that just discouraged even more blacks from participating in that. That's them going down there. I mean, goodness, they kidnapping up. I mean, the whole thing that happened. Yeah, you go back. Look what happened with Cheney and the two white kids. Was just him, and so that really resonated in a very negative way in terms of building the movement. It was a very discouraging development at that time. And so when you look,
Yeah. No, I mean, and all the protests that led up to then, and of course, you would go 2 years later, you get Bloody Sunday, which led to the voting rights, legislation. So many things that happened over those 3 years, 63, 64, 65. And, fascinating stuff.
Yes.
I want to bring in our good friend John. A long time listener and great caller and great friend of the program, and yours truly. John in Minnesota, you're next with Herb Boyd. Go right ahead, my friend.
Yeah, I wanted to say that there is a lot of similarities in the sense that almost every black organization at that time were infiltrated by the FBI, and they're still harassing Black Lives Matter people. And so, there are very powerful forces in this country that really don't seem to understand the needs of various communities and are not supportive of that. And I don't think they really want to see change. Because if it wasn't so, why would they be infiltrating Black Lives Matter groups in Denver and Boulder, various cities? It's a waste of our money because these groups are not a threat to anybody. They might be more strident, but who cares? I'm interested in the leadership that they are providing for the entire nation. And, you look at Justin Jones, Justin Pearson from Tennessee, Fannie Willis. There's just a lot of great people coming out of this whole political movement, I guess you could say, coming to the fore, and that we could recognize that these people are great leaders. And even my own city council person would make an excellent senator, representative, president. I mean, very capable people, throughout our city council, and then also Keith Ellison.
Yeah, Minnesota has led the nation really in so many ways.
General, yeah.
You're right,
So
John, with Omar and Keith Ellison's done a tremendous job. Let me get
and I'm
her
hoping that
perspective
there's.
Well, the transmission was a bit clogged up there. It was not a lot of distortion, and wasn't hearing a lot of what John was saying. But obviously, one of the things that
there have been a lot of people from J. Edgar Hoover on that has really disrupted, not only back then in the 1960s, but has gone after Black Lives Matter and even the folks today.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Well, essential to this discussion would be COINTELPRO. The whole counterintelligence program was orchestrated by the FBI in order to go after, to prevent the emergence of a Black Messiah. And of course, that was targeting a lot of the leadership, not beyond King, but creating the dissension between various political formations. You had Black Panther Party and the US movement out there in Los Angeles. All of that, to say nothing of what happened between Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver, all of that was orchestrated, and the kind of what you call disinformation campaign that was put together by COINTELPRO. So that's certainly got to be considered as a factor in terms of demoralizing, discouraging, and disrupting, and just virtually, sicking brothers on each other. And that's that was something that would set us back considerably at that time. So it's a good point, John.
I just think that what you have and what you saw, and you've done so much great work, and you just Google Herb Boyd on Malcolm X. You've talked to the family and so forth. I mean, there's no doubt that there was FBI involvement in that assassination. Even though people point the fingers, at the religious component to it. But there's so much there. We're gonna have to get you one of these days for an entire hour, Herb, because there's so much to go. But thank you for taking out memory lane.
Oh yes, I would be welcome that moment because with the book coming out in the fall, I got the book coming out on Malcolm X and the CIA, which extends obviously the FBI, CIA. They were like always in cahoots. So there's no separation between, and the State Department, some other State Department agencies. All of them were very much concerned about the kind of rising activism that Malcolm X created.
That's right. Hey, Herb, thank you. Have a great weekend. Happy Labor Day weekend, and we'll talk.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, man. Great work on CBS. Talk to you soon. We'll be right back.
You don't have to wait for amazing deals on a new floor. Get spring Black Friday deals right now at Lumber Liquidators Flooring. This week, save up to 35% on gorgeous hardwood and waterproof vinyl floors. Plus, we can arrange for installation by professional, independent contractors. And with special financing, you can get started today. These are the floors homes are built on. Lumber Liquidators Flooring.
Haul packages for a living? A gas-powered Mercedes-Benz Sprinter delivers. transport people, a Sprinter van with 0% financing is a 5-star idea. If food delivery is your thing, then a gas Sprinter caters to you. And if you're a general contractor, the Sprinter with 0% financing nails it. With innovation, safety, and technology, Sprinter is built for you. And it's built for your bottom line with 0% financing. The Mercedes-Benz Sprinter, starting at just $33,790.
Hi, I'm Karen, owner of Lone Star Transfer. If you are a timeshare owner, getting out is probably a top priority. And now that annual maintenance fees are coming due, this ongoing burden and expense is at the top of your list. Thankfully, we can help. Let us do for you what we have done for thousands of others across the country. Our process is done legally, ethically, and quickly. Lone Star Transfer has a 99% success rate and an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. We are a family-owned business and will personally make sure your experience is a pleasant one. Don't let another day go by with maintenance fees taking your hard-earned money. Give us a call for a no-obligation consultation at 844-284-4863. That's 844-284-4863 or online at lonestartransfer.com. That's lonestartransfer.com.
I'm Rich Rosario. 1 in 4 heart attack survivors will have another cardiovascular event. Award-winning author and American Heart Association volunteer Dr. Nisa Goldberg explains the hidden risks.
Many people don't realize that managing hidden risks like untreated high blood pressure, unhealthy eating habits, and poor medication adherence may reduce your risk for having another heart attack.
The American Heart Association's Secondary Heart Attack Prevention Initiative, sponsored by Bayer, reminds you to follow your doctor's recommendations to help reduce your risk factors.
Take your medication as prescribed. Certain medicines like aspirin can lower your risk of another cardiac event. Aspirin is not appropriate for everyone, so be sure to talk to your doctor before you begin an aspirin regimen. It's important to understand your medications and take them correctly. Manage risk factors like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Quit smoking, eat healthier, and get active.
Learn more ways to thrive after a heart attack at heart.org/oneisenough.
Supporting the middle class. This is the Jeff Santos Show.
"33 minutes past the hour. It is the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into, coming to you live from the South Coast here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. 2 hours today, folks. We'll be chatting with good friend John Nichols momentarily. And then a quick conversation with Aaron Regenberg. He is the candidate for U.S. Congress in the special election next Tuesday, the 5th. If you're a Rhode Island resident in the Cicilline seat, go out and vote. I urge you to vote for Mr. Regenberg. Saw him on Sunday with the likes of our good friend Senator Bernie Sanders and the great flight attendant union leader Sarah Nelson, amongst many other local officials there in support of Mr. Regenberg. It's a really good candidate. I urge you, if you are a Rhode Island resident, and number one, to vote for Regenberg. He is a Bernie Sanders disciple, and as Bernie Sanders said, somebody who you could consider a progressive brother in arms. All right. With that, somebody who's a brother in arms to our show is the longest serving contributor to the Jeff Santos Show, going back to 2006. He is a brother in arms with myself and many other progressives from the great state of Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin. He is, of course, the national affairs correspondent of The Nation magazine, author of many great books, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, a look inside Henry Wallace. It's great to have John Nichols back with us once again. John, happy Thursday, my man. How are you?
I'm good, brother. How are you doing?
I am doing very well, and let me just alert our listeners and viewers to the fact that there are some great articles that you have written over the past 2 or 3 weeks on the Trump election train, as well as Mr. Bernie Sanders and the UAW potential action there going on as well. So check out the Nation website, and you can check out John Nichols' great pieces. I want to start with Donald Trump because, I love the fact that, you talked about the liars and the more lies, that I retweeted that. to me, this is where we are. Our good friend Mark, we'll probably hear from in a couple of minutes. A great caller, big fan of yours, and a great friend of the show. Has talked about using the F word, fascism, and that's what you get with Donald Trump and his followers, many of them. And to me, this is really. I don't know how to say it, the reality. But if you listen to that debate, which you wrote about, it's a bunch of lies. It's Hunter Biden is the worst person in the world, and Joe Biden is this, and it goes on and on and on. Your thoughts, my friend?
Sure. I think that the best way to understand what's going on within the Republican Party is that they've fallen into the most dangerous of all political places, and that is that they believe their own lies, that they've actually subsumed the memes, the kind of online trolling to such an extent that their whole debate was about fantasies. It wasn't about reality.
Yeah.
If you listen to their debate, you would think every major in the city was every major city in the United States was a hellhole, right? That it was an unlivable place. When in reality, unfortunately, real estate values went through the roof. People all want to move to cities. They're not hell. They're actually, they've got problems like every place else. That's important to admit. But their fantasy was completely off target. Similarly with Hunter Biden, similarly with the notion that Joe Biden is somehow incompetent or dysfunctional, similar with the notion that Donald Trump was, as Vivek Ramaswamy suggested, the greatest president of the 21st century.
Yeah, greatest in the generation.
What you've got is, a situation where they literally believe the worst of their lies. And it becomes dangerous. Obviously, you've seen that in playouts of, political violence, but it also has a danger as regards policy because they believe lies about things like climate change. And as, again, Ramaswamy suggested, there are people on that stage who actually don't believe that climate change is real. And also people who, even if they do accept that it's real, don't want to do anything of significance about it. So you put all those pieces together and you have a political party that is operating, wholly on fantasy. And unfortunately, because they are one of the two major parties in a two-party system, that fantasy becomes, a part of our national discourse. It is a very problematic situation and one that is new to America. We haven't been in this place before. Historically, you had Democratic and Republican parties, both of them flawed, but both of them operating from certain premises that they could agree on. Now they can't even agree on reality.
Yeah, it's it really was like watching a cult group talking in their own language that nobody else could understand.
Oh yeah,
except you can understand this, but
that's a very good way to put it.
Yeah, no, it's
a very good way to put it. It is, they speak their own language.
Yeah, no, it's Hunter Biden is the second coming of the devil, and Joe Biden is his enabler, and of course, as some people point out, Hunter Biden does not work in government, does not have influence on government, and but they want him to think that he's like the guy right behind the curtain. I want to get to what I think is important, though, and what you have said in some of these great articles. Again, go to thenation.com. I think that you need, as you pointed out in one of the pieces, that the Democratic Party has to be bold, as we've talked about for a long time, bold progressive Democrats in the line of Bernie Sanders and AOC and others, of course, Jayapal, et cetera. But you have to have an agenda that connects, whether it's to young people, and we're talking about climate change, these hurricanes in Florida, the fires in Hawaii, that obviously resonates. But just the economic message, which, polls have showed us, our good friend David Paleologo, Suffolk University, USA Today, Boston Globe, would tell you that, their concerns are economic like every other demographic group of their generation that works.
Sure.
But a green job would be very helpful to them. because they know that the climate change is a crisis and it's not going away unless we do something about it. No matter what Russ and Johnny would say, that we need more fossil fuels, to coexist in this environment. It's insane what they believe on that other side. Your thoughts, John, about where the Democrats have to really start getting their message out, because as you say, Trump has got his message out, the Republicans have their message out. It's lunacy, it's cultish, but it's a message.
Well, you're right. And I think that's a very good point. And what is important, what I've tried to emphasize in a number of articles recently, is that the Democratic message cannot be simply that they're not Donald Trump, right? That is an insufficient message politically. It doesn't motivate the type of major turnout, really, bumped turnout that could actually give Democrats control not just of the White House, but of the House and Senate. I think it's very possible that Biden gets reelected. I think he has the upper hand ultimately. And if it's against Trump, it's even a greater upper hand. But that doesn't necessarily translate to control the House and Senate. And if he doesn't get the House and Senate, he's going to end up with a Trump Congress. Big disaster, right? So they have to create a counter narrative to Trump. Trump is going to dominate the storyline because of his trials. There's a chance that of the 91 indictments he faces, 1 or 2 of them he'll be found not guilty on. If he is found not guilty on any of the indictments, he'll turn that into a talking point, on steroids. And everything you hear from Trump will be that it was all a lie, that, a juror someplace that saw through the lies, and so will the American people on November. And if that becomes his storyline, and if you've got some, uncertainty or some troubles with the economy, some other things, Trump could suddenly be very viable. Then the question is, what do the Democrats offer as an alternative? My argument is that they ought to offer enough to actually spur a second conversation, a conversation that isn't about Trump, that is about the Democratic agenda. To get that conversation going, you have to go big. You have to promise Medicare for all, health care, no compromises, you go all in. An expansion of Social Security, no compromises, you go all in. A real response to the climate crisis, not half steps, not just a few electric vehicles, but a real shift in how we do a lot of things. And finally, I think it's really important, we're coming up on Labor Day, to commit to a massive increase in labor union membership and to say that as president, Biden will take the necessary steps. Yeah. And that means passing the PRO Act. And so you've got to have a Democratic Congress. It also means way strengthening the NLRB so it can continue to issue very strong, very good rulings, getting the Labor Department, up to speed and well-financed and focused. I mean, it's a whole agenda. And Biden should talk about that with every bit as much energy as he talks about the need to maintain and protect right to choose and the need to maintain and protect Social Security and things of that nature. Labor union membership should be a big part of his message in 2024. If it is, he'll be attacked for it. The Republicans will get mad at him. They'll make all sorts of false claims and that, which is great because he will then be the center of the conversation, and he will be having that conversation on issues that favor the Democrats, that favor Joe Biden. So that's, to my mind, it's not that hard an equation, but he's got to do it. If he doesn't, then all they're going to do
and you got to get out there
is talk about Trump.
You got to get out there in prime time, not 2 o'clock in the afternoon East Coast time, which is 11 o'clock in the West. You can't do that stuff. And this is full court press because you're going to make the distinction between the contrast of the GOP, which is a fascist party led by a cult movement leader in Donald Trump, who's a con man, and the Democratic Party, which for all its problems, has demonstrated. And again, this is an alliance that I think a lot of progressives have had issues with. And, I include myself in this to a certain extent. But Joe Biden has basically, taken a lot of Bernie Sanders issues from the American Rescue Plan on to a lot of what is in the IRA, which was formerly, of course, Build Back Better, which got, held up in Congress by a lot of corporate Dems. But the fact is that, and particularly Joe Manchin, the fact is that you have to be able to show the contrast. And Sanders has given them a blueprint. Look, I saw him Sunday, at the rally for Aaron Regenberg, candidate with a very good chance to win the Cicilline seat in Rhode Island, the 1st congressional district. And we'll be talking to Regenberg coming up next after you, John. And, he said it, look, he goes, we need people who are difference makers. We need people who are going to challenge the status quo. And, and that goes to your point of being bold. Just people just to sit there and become, another mini Joe Manchin. We don't need more mini me's, to quote our good friend Michael Myers and Austin Powers. This is the time for people to stand up, and there's been enough of them. Our previous caller, John, mentioned Keith Ellison and his great work in Minnesota as AG, and you can talk about Omar in the great city of Minneapolis, and in Michigan there with Tlaib, and on with AOC and Sheldon Whitehouse and Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, et cetera. There are a number of folks out there, and I think they have made it clear that they want a progressive agenda. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, the polling data is what you rely on in something like this, and polling data is absolutely clear. For instance, I'll give you an example. We're just talking about labor unions, right? And what a big deal it would be to advance a plan to dramatically increase labor union membership. And you say, okay, well, but that must be a pretty radical idea. No, it's not radical at all. 88% of Democrats favor stronger unions. They are supportive of unions. And 69% of independents favor stronger unions. 42% of Republicans favor stronger unions. This is an incredibly popular idea. It's every bit as popular as protecting reproductive rights. It's every bit as popular as, defending democracy. It ought to be up there with that list of issues. And then here's the other twist on it. When you talk about, strengthening labor unions, polling shows that 90% of people under the age of 30 want stronger unions, favor unions when they're on strike, the whole bit. They're all in for powerful unions. And that's across all political and ideological boundaries. This is an issue like abortion rights, like student loan debt relief, that really does excite and energize young people. Remember, these are people who are coming into the economy. They would like union protections. And so that's just one example. We could go through all the others. But you get the point, Jeff, that when you're talking about something that has 90% support, it's not hard to do. I mean, this is what you should do. And the wild thing about it is the Republicans are absolutely on the other side. They will not fight you for that territory. And so it's such a powerful, strong way to advance a cause.
I mean, it's a pretty simple line. It's, it's the Republicans, profit over people. The Democrats are people over profits. And, it's a very simple, easy decision. That's why 90% of the young people do it. They look at it. In fact, look, we're against powerful interests, but if we join together a we message, not about I, not about the iPhone, but, it is to me so important to have that idea, and young people do it. All right, let's go to the phones, talk to our good friend who is a former labor leader himself in the Northern California area, our good friend Mark from the great city of San Francisco. You're next with John Nichols of The Nation magazine. Go right ahead, Mr. Mark.
Yeah, John and Jeff, they've got to change the labor laws, and they've got to make it easier for people to thrive in a union membership, like getting a first-time contract. So there's a lot involved, but you got to elect people that are willing to make the changes to empower workers and union workers. Because right now, a lot of the laws, and there's a lot of disadvantages against unions, and we've got to change that as well.
You're exactly right. The deck is stacked against unions. It has been for a long time, and that's had a huge impact. It's one of the reasons why we've seen, a real collapse in union membership. When Roosevelt was president of the United States, roughly a third of Americans were in non-farm industries were unionized. It was still true throughout Eisenhower's presidency. In fact, under Eisenhower, we hit the peak of union membership at about 35%. Now we're down overall at about 10% roughly, and union membership actually slightly declined from the first year to the second year of Joe Biden's presidency. So despite the fact that he's a very pro-union president, he hasn't yet achieved the changes that are necessary to really make it easy for unions to grow. That's what he's got to do. And it's a great issue to run on, to say, look, we tried to do some of this in the first term. We got some things through. We got the NLRB on a better standing. We got an infrastructure act that's got some good labor language in it. But we need, as you're suggesting, we need that labor law reform. We need to make it absolutely certain that workers who want to organize a union can do so without barriers, without getting fired, without being attacked, and that they can negotiate that first contract and get the reality of a union in play. If you clear the barriers that are there, if you clear them out of the way, we'll see an explosion in union membership, an explosion in union growth. That will be incredibly empowering. And so it's doable. And Biden should run on it. He should make that a central part of his theme as he runs for a second term.
Yeah, and Mark, I'll give you some time here. But to me, this is the key way to bring in the progressive movement. Bernie Sanders, very big on labor, was talking to unions on Sunday after he left the event in Providence for Regenberg. Went to a union rally in Philadelphia. He understands that, and a lot of his followers understand this. Again, his economic populism is the big part of Bernie Sanders. Yes, he understands the need for reforms in so many other areas, LGBTQ, obviously the racism in this country and the concern, his own colleagues and people like AOC, a Latina, Tlaib, an Arab American, on and on. But that to me is a central focus, and this is something that Biden, who was endorsed by the International Association of Firefighters, the Teamsters, the AFL-CIO, he has a great relationship with unions, a great way to merge it. To me, this is an important piece, and I know, Mark, that you always understand that we have to come together, more of the center Democrats as well as the left. Mark, still there? Guess we must have lost Mark. Go ahead, John. Go ahead. I see. That's fine.
Yeah.
John,
look,
your thought.
We're a little bit confused here. So I think I'm on, and
you are.
Look,
go right ahead.
Here's the thing that we want to. Here's what we want to focus on. Labor law reform is something that can be achieved. It passed the House. It can pass the Senate. It only failed last time because of two things. The filibuster, which has to be done away with, and the obstruction by Manchin and Sinema. So the question is, how do you get beyond that? The way you get beyond that is electing a Democratic House, because Republican-controlled House won't do this, and then by electing a Senate with a sufficient Democratic majority of pro-labor, clearly, pro-labor law reform Democrats. You've got about 48, maybe 49 there. You got to get yourself up to 50 at least, and probably to 51. And so that's what Biden should run on. He should talk about it. He should say, look, reelect me and give me a Senate I can work with. We'll do this. And I promise you, within a year, you'll have a massive spike in labor union organizing and membership in this country. We're already going to see something of a spike because of some of the rulings by the NLRB, which are very good. But we need to take it to the next step. And the only way you get it to that next step is by doing an election change.
No doubt. All right, let's go back to the phones and talk to our good friend John in Minnesota. You're next with John Nichols of The Nation. John D, say hi to John N.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, I just wanted to say I thought your piece that you're doing for The Nation entitled The Republican Party, the party of the big lie and even the bigger lie. And, you're talking about things that unfortunately right now that people should hear and could bring people together to change our politics for the better. But we never get to talk about that because we've been talking about, I would say, lies for years since Fox News came up with that formula. And, what do they learn? Like Vivek Ramaswamy, what does he learn in Harvard or Yale or wherever Ivy League school he went to? They learn how to lie. He's a presenter. He's not a person that is going to solve anything except to eliminate government, make it safe for rich people like himself. The same with DeSantis. He's not going to solve any problems. And at the same time, we could bring together all of those elements, like, for instance, Black Lives Matter, all of these issues about LGBTQ issues, racism, and inequality, because that's essentially what's going on. There's just inequality overall, economic inequality and racism and LGBTQ, and nothing gets talked about in terms of, well, I know
they don't get the attention.
I'm here in Minnesota. Yeah, I'm in Minnesota, and we're having a drought essentially of 5 years, but who talks about it? Nobody, even locally. They really don't hit the issue, that global warming is causing the atmosphere to hold far more moisture, so we don't get our summer storms. And this is bad for a farming area like Wisconsin, where we depend on
no
that
doubt,
as part of our economy.
John
Anyway,
D. John Nichols, the media, I mean, one of the reasons why, it's something that we've been trying to do is to get a bigger footprint in this country, is because there are very few places that, what John is talking about, whether it's climate change, whether it's concern about droughts, as he is in the great state of Minnesota, or, the concerns, over police brutality. You just don't get these issues on mainstream. You don't got to read The Nation or listen to this show, others like it, to do it. Mr. Nichols.
Look, that's, I think what I understand here is that we're trying to get to some clarity about, a whole host of issues. And I think that's important, but I will tell you right now that the most important thing to understand about what the caller's raising is that we don't have a media anymore that does the sort of thoroughgoing coverage of all the things that are going on across the country that we used to have. And that lack of media is a real problem. It allows propagandists and fake news to fill a lot of the voids and do so in ways that are very opportunistic. The way to counter it, of course, is to A, support independent media like this show, but B, to have Democratic political figures, people like Biden, spend a lot more time explaining things. They shouldn't just take a stand on things. They should give you depth and explanation, even offer you a perspective on what the different sides are, and then come down to an explanation why they are what they're at. To do that, you've got to get out on the campaign trail and spend more time, outside of Washington, talking about the issues of the whole country rather than sitting in Washington. And
The Jeff Santos Show is brought to you by Mass Peace Action. With over 9,000 supporters in the state, MPA uses the power of grassroots organizing to end war, create a more just foreign policy, and cut wasteful Pentagon spending to support the needs of the American people, like healthcare, education, infrastructure, and the environment. 20 years of war is long enough. To become a member or learn more, visit masspeaceaction.org. Don't wish for peace, work for it.
You don't have to wait for amazing deals on a new floor. Get spring Black Friday deals right now at Lumber Liquidators Flooring. This week, save up to 35% on gorgeous hardwood and waterproof vinyl floors. Plus, we can arrange for installation by professional, independent contractors. And with special financing, you can get started today. These are the floors homes are built on. Lumber Liquidators Flooring.
I'm Rich Rosario. 1 in 4 heart attack survivors will have another cardiovascular event. Award-winning author and American Heart Association volunteer Dr. Nisa Goldberg explains the hidden risks.
Many people don't realize that managing hidden risks like untreated high blood pressure, unhealthy eating habits, and poor medication adherence may reduce your risk for having another heart attack.
The American Heart Association's Secondary Heart Attack Prevention Initiative, sponsored by Bayer, reminds you to follow your doctor's recommendations to help reduce your risk factors.
Take your medication as prescribed. Certain medicines like aspirin can lower your risk of another cardiac event. Aspirin is not appropriate for everyone, so be sure to talk to your doctor before you begin an aspirin regimen. It's important to understand your medications and take them correctly. Manage risk factors like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Quit smoking, eat healthier, and get active.
Learn more ways to thrive after a heart attack at heart.org/oneisenough.
The search on land for further victims of the deadly wildfires in Maui is essentially complete, officials told reporters.
Although there is a list of 388 individuals unaccounted for, posted on August 24th, authorities anticipate only marginal growth in the death toll during the concluding phases of the search. Haley White reporting.
Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis, in a filing Tuesday, reiterated her desire for all 19 defendants charged in her Georgia election interference case to stand trial together.
Willis submitted the filing subsequent to Judge Scott McAfee's order for defendant Kenneth Chesebro to face trial on October 23rd. This decision followed Chesebro's request for an expedited trial. Additionally, former President Donald Trump's legal team informed the court of their intention to request a separation of the cases. Lawrence Keller reporting.
Russian state media has released rare footage showing Paul Whelan inside a notorious prison camp.
U.S. officials have spoken with Paul within the last several months. I think, as you all know that, but it was reassuring to see that he remains, and this is to use his brother's words, unbowed. Paul continues to show tremendous courage. That does not change that his circumstances are truly unacceptable.
Hurricane Idalia roared ashore in Florida, making landfall in the Big Bend region just before 8 a.m. Wednesday as a powerful Category 3 hurricane. The latest path took Idalia through Georgia and into the Carolinas with life-threatening storm surges.
Our sheriff has just asked everyone to stay put, stay off of the road, and until they can clear some of these big trees. And then the other thing for me is I have not been out of my driveway because we have a lot of pine trees and oak trees down in our yard. It looks like a disaster zone from what the pictures that I'm receiving and from the calls that I'm getting. As you said, it looks like a war zone in town.
This is the latest news headlines. The Biden administration announced the initial slate of 10 prescription medicines chosen as a part of the first-ever price negotiations between Medicare and the nation's pharmaceutical giants.
The medications listed are among the most common and expensive prescriptions that treat a range of conditions such as heart failure, blood clots, diabetes, arthritis, Crohn's disease, and more, Biden stated in a communique heralding the commencement of the highly anticipated initiative. Clara Hudson reporting.
Late last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention signaled it expects to have an updated COVID vaccine available by mid-September, along with the likely recommendation that everyone should get the latest booster shot.
This announcement coincided with a release of CDC data on Monday, indicating a sixth consecutive week of increasing COVID-related hospitalizations. Hospitalizations surged by 18.8% for the week ending August 19th, a pattern reminiscent of levels observed in April. Michael Wallace reporting.
Myron Burrell, who was sent to prison for life as a teenager but was set free after 18 years behind bars, was arrested in Minneapolis suburb Tuesday after police said they found a handgun and drugs in his SUV.
Burrell was taken into custody and booked at the Hennepin County Jail under suspicion of possessing a handgun as a prohibited person. Although formal charges had not been filed, police mentioned the potential addition of charges related to driving while intoxicated and drug possession. Kevin Sanders reporting.
Police in the northern Texas city of Allen found 4 people dead Monday in what investigators say was an apparent murder-suicide.
Police indicated that the fatalities were apparently due to a murder-suicide. However, they did not promptly release the identities or ages of the deceased, nor did they provide additional particulars about the incident. Kyle Norris reporting.
And that's the latest news headlines. I'm Alan Edwards.
Hi, I'm Karen, owner of Lone Star Transfer. If you are a timeshare owner, getting out is probably a top priority. And now that annual maintenance fees are coming due, this ongoing burden and expense is at the top of your list. Thankfully, we can help. Let us do for you what we have done for thousands of others across the country. Our process is done legally, ethically, and quickly. Lone Star Transfer has a 99% success rate and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. We are a family-owned business and will personally make sure your experience is a pleasant one. Don't let another day go by with maintenance fees taking your hard-earned money. Give us a call for a no-obligation consultation at 844-284-4863. That's 844-284-4863. Or online at LoneStarTransfer.com. That's LoneStarTransfer.com.
Are you living with pain? I was, after a nasty fall. I got relief with 1 Hour Pain Relief. I'm Barry Yarconi, president, and here's Lisa, a Marine who was injured in Iraq.
After surviving an explosion, I was on horrible painkillers for lingering head, shoulder, back, and knee pain, but I hated the dangers and side effects. My friend told me about 1 Hour Pain Relief, and now I'm off the drugs.
1 Hour Pain Relief is the result of 15 years of research on an amazing extract from hops, the plant used to flavor beer.
Whether your pain is from an injury or just aging, you get safe, all-day relief in less than 1 hour.
We're so sure you'll love 1 Hour Pain Relief too that we'll send you a 1-week trial for just a small shipping charge. Call 800-269-9500 right now. That's 800-269-9500. There's no gimmicks, no obligation, no automatic shipments. Stop living with pain. Call 800-269-9500 for your 1-week trial or visit onehourpainrelief.com. That's 800-269-9500.
This is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America together, investing, activism, and supporting the middle class. Now, here's Jeff.
It is hour 2 of the Jeff Santos Show on our weekly program here, Thursday at 3 o'clock. Live from the South Coast here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, not far from the Congressional District Number 1 in Providence, Rhode Island, of course, held by Congressman David Cicilline, who has been a guest on the Jeff Santos Show quite a bit over the last decade or so. I am hoping, and a lot of other progressives are too, that there's going to be a new member of Congress that will have a chance to come on this show, and many others who I think basically identifies with the likes of people like Bernie Sanders, who was in the great city of Providence on Sunday endorsing Aaron Regenberg, candidate for the 1st Congressional District in Rhode Island. He has also been endorsed by the great AOC, amongst many others, including the great union leader who's also had a presence on this program, Sarah Nelson of the Flight Attendants Union. It's great to have Aaron Regenberg with us on the phone. Aaron, great to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Look, big day on Tuesday. You're doing well in the polls. A lot of people want to know a lot about Aaron Regenberg, why you're running, sir. You have a platform. Go right ahead, my friend.
Well, you know, I've got a 2-year-old son, and like a lot of parents, I worry about the future. Will our kids be safe at school from guns and mass shootings? Will they have clean air to breathe and a livable future? Will we have a functioning democracy by the time they're old enough to vote?
Yes.
But I'm running really because I'm not just scared and frustrated about these problems. I'm hopeful, because I have seen again and again here in Rhode Island that people can come together and they can take on these kinds of entrenched interests, whether it's the gun industry or fossil fuel companies or big pharma, and we can actually win. I've seen that as a community organizer. I've seen it as a state legislator. I've seen it most recently as a climate lawyer. And David Cicilline has been a real progressive champion. He's been someone who's had the courage to take on Republicans and stand up to some of the world's biggest corporations. And I'm running for Congress because I want to continue that kind of advocacy. I know that together we can build a fair economy and a livable future for our kids. And that's the work that I want to contribute to in Washington.
Well, there's no doubt, and an impressive showing for you, particularly amongst young folks, 18 to 34-year-olds, millennials, Generation Z, that waited in line, and I was part of that. And what was so impressive is that young people, like yourself, you're in your early 30s, understand the climate change, understand the economic inequality in this country. And it was very interesting to listen to both Sarah Nelson and Bernie Sanders speak about you and about the situation that the country is facing. And, one of the things that Sanders said is the fact that, we just don't need somebody to occupy the seat and, have a D next to their name. We have enough Joe Manchins of the world. We want somebody who's going to fight. And that seems to be your theme here, whether it's on climate change and other issues. If you can expand on that.
Well, I think what Bernie said is exactly right. I mean, the first congressional district, this is a deep blue district, right? It's the kind of district that can support a lot more than just one more Democratic vote. It can support someone who's going to be an organizer up there, right? Who's going to really work to move an agenda, to take on big pharma and health insurance companies to try to push for Medicare for all, to take on big oil, to win real climate action and a Green New Deal. We need someone who's going to both bring every tool at their disposal to take the fight to Republicans, to block these terrifying attacks on our rights and our democracy, and who's willing to push the Democratic Party when necessary to be the best version of itself that it can be. And that's work, again, that I've been working to be a part of and contribute to here in Rhode Island for many years. And those are exactly the kind of fights that I think we need more energy on in Washington.
There's no doubt that that is what is needed, not only in Rhode Island, but around this country. People want to reach you, want to get involved in the campaign, help you this weekend. But again, the primary election is on Tuesday. How do they reach you, Aaron?
Well, thanks so much. Our website is aaronregenberg.com. And my contact information is on there if anyone wants to reach out personally, but there's also ways there to sign up. We're running a grassroots campaign. We're really proud. I'm an organizer, as I've said. That's how I got my start in politics. So that's the kind of campaign we're running. We're knocking on doors. We're making phone calls. We're doing relational organizing so that folks can reach out to their personal networks. And there's lots of opportunities. It's Get Out the Vote weekend. It's a special election. It's the Tuesday after Labor Day. So there's a lot of work to do to make sure that we're reminding folks and getting out the vote. And there's opportunities on our website to sign up. We'd love anyone who's excited about this campaign, about the issues that we're running on, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, taking on corporate power in Washington. We'd love anyone to get involved because we can certainly use the help.
Aaron, best of luck. Again, I urge all of our listeners, as we said in the first hour, to vote for Aaron Regenberg if you are in the 1st Congressional District in Providence, or if you know of anybody that lives in that district, again, formerly held by David Cicilline. We urge you to do so. If I voted in Providence, which I don't, I would vote for the next congressman, my belief, Mr. Regenberg. Thank you so much. I hope you can come on the show when you are the congressman. I look forward to that, David. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Well, I'd love that. I really appreciate your kind words. It means a lot coming from you. And it was great to be here, and I look forward to coming back.
Look forward to it as well. Thanks so much. All the best on Tuesday. Thank you, Aaron Regenberg, right here on the Jeff Santos Show. Again, the election is Tuesday, the 5th of September. Folks, we're going to make a transition now to the foreign policy world, and we'll get our two great folks lined up in a minute here. But again, it is really important. We're going to go to Corbin and Garvey momentarily. The key part of what we're dealing with right now is to get young people engaged in politics. Well, obviously, one of the things we look to do over the next few months is to start communicating and bringing together X, Y, and Z, generations X, Y, and Z, and how we all have the climate, the earth in common. We all have economics, and we see in this country the economic inequality is massive in the nation. And if you look around where we are in the United States, not only in blue New England, but the fact is throughout this country, we need to get younger people engaged. It is not just out at the elections, but it's every day, and it's a cultural thing as well. We're going to be talking with our good friend Patrick Claiborne a little bit later. Covers the NFL, but is also very much engaged in social issues, as is a lot of the players, the NFLPA, as an example. But it is thoroughly important that it's not just in November, or in this case September 5th in Providence, Rhode Island, to get young people engaged. And as you heard, and one of the reasons why I think Regenberg will be a great member of Congress is that he's an organizer. Well, what was Bernie Sanders? An organizer. Look, frankly, what was Barack Obama? An organizer. These folks start at the local level, and that's what you need. I mean, AOC, who endorsed Mr. Regenberg, she was a bartender and then got involved in a lot of campaigns. I think she worked for both John Kerry and Ted Kennedy at one point back when she was in college at Boston University. I mean, that's what you want. So you want people, on a daily basis engaged. Not everyone can do that, but a lot more can. And that's how you really change the narrative, which is what is pounded down by the right wing in this country. And if we don't answer back, as John Nichols talked about last hour, then what you're going to end up having is a fascist country. You're going to have one media world telling you what is right and what isn't right. There's no talk, as our good friend John in Minnesota talked about. There's no discussion about issues like climate change or the drought in Minnesota or concerns over labor or concerns over Medicare for all. It's just not. So that's what you have. All right. With that, let's talk a little bit internationally. And of course, we get two great guests. We're going to bring them over into the next half-hour block as well. Brian Garvey is the Massachusetts Peace Action Deputy Director. Mass Peace Action is a sponsor of the Jeff Santos Show. In a minute, he will join us via video from Boston, Massachusetts. And then the fantastic former Reagan Deputy Defense Secretary, and folks, about the only guy that I have on from the Reagan administration. He's the only one allowed, really, frankly. Although it's better than the current regime they have on the Republican side these days. Other people, that is. Larry's separate from all of that. He's, of course, a Vietnam vet, and we thank him for his service. And he's also senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. And our great producer, Jalen, I think, has both of them ready to rock and roll. So let's bring them up. Larry Korb, the person in Washington to my right, and Brian Garvey to my left in the great city of Boston. We have dogs along with us, too. I presume that's Larry's. So we bring in the dogs. We love them as well. Gentlemen, great to have you on this program today. We appreciate you both. Okay, so I want to start with something that I think is connected to the world of Ukraine. And I'm going to start with you, Brian, here. We've been talking about peace. We've been talking about diplomacy and the need for diplomacy. And it is, to me, extremely important that that diplomacy not only ends at the Russian border, but it also ends, and we get Larry on the move here, trying to quiet his doggy. So we'll try to see if we can keep up with him. But in the meantime, Brian, I think that the idea in the continent of Africa, where there are so many dictatorships, so much poverty, and which usually goes hand in hand, that whatever diplomatic focus ends Ukraine, hopefully sooner rather than later, that it continues, because in the world of Africa, you're not going to win hearts and minds of people with more bombs and more guns. Your thoughts, Brian? I think we have a problem with. Go ahead, Brian. Still a problem. I don't know, Jalen, if you can help out here. Okay, we'll go to Larry. Same question to you, Larry, if you get a chance to hear that, and we'll try to get Brian back in here.
Yeah,
my question was
the question.
Ukraine. Obviously, we need to get a diplomatic solution to Ukraine. That is one part of it. The other part of it is that, with this look at Africa, and our friends at Democracy Now! Did a really great piece on this a couple of days ago. We have dictatorships in almost every country there. And we have poverty that is, indiscriminable. So you have that mix, which is a typical mix. You see this in Central America, too. And we need to be able to use our diplomatic reach, the JFK vision of Peace Corps and Vista, the whole perspective that we have had over the years. It's not, you're not going to win over the hearts and minds, as you well know, tragically firsthand in Vietnam, with more bombs and more guns. That's your thoughts.
Well, basically, going to the first part, we've discussed many times, you're going to need a diplomatic solution in Ukraine. Nobody can, quote unquote, win the war. I mean, the Ukrainians have launched their offensive, but basically, for the Russians, though they didn't do very good on their offensive, defense always has the advantage in the war, and that's what we found out in Vietnam, for example. So nobody's going to win it. The real question is, what are the terms? Is Ukraine going to demand Crimea, or what will they demand? I would think if they can get back the 20% that they've lost since the war started, that would be good for them. But yes, but nobody can say that publicly, because if you say it publicly, that weakens, everybody says, Biden and NATO says, well, we're going to have a diplomatic solution. The Russians say, oh, okay, they're tired of helping them. We can hang on. Now, when you get to Africa, I mean, you just had another coup this week in Gabon. This is the second coup this year. Basically, if you go back since 1950, there have been 106 coups in Africa. Wow. I mean, it's incredible, and you look at it, just since the last 25 years, the one country that is a great example is South Africa. They made the peaceful transition, they got an elected government, and it has worked. But these other, it's very difficult in these. You got Gabon and Niger just recently too, and so it becomes very hard. You've got to deal with their underlying problems in terms of poverty and women's rights. Those things you got to deal with, so you won't have these coups all the time.
No doubt. All right. I think we have Brian back. Brian, can you hear me?
I hear you fine. I'm not sure if you hear me. Do you?
I hear you quite well. Great
oh,
to see
wonderful.
You. Great to see you and hear you. Go right ahead, my man.
I'm so glad. Sorry for the inconvenience.
No worries. Go right ahead, Brian.
So, yes, I think that what you continue to see on the African subcontinent is the ramifications of exploitation, which can be extremely long-term. The ramification of warfare, which can be extremely long-term. This doesn't just apply to the continent of Africa. I was just recently speaking to a young man who grew up in Belfast, who was saying the same thing, that despite the fact that there was a successful peace agreement way back in the 90s, early 90s, that still Northern Ireland is feeling the effects of the Troubles in terms of drug addiction rates, in terms of suicide rates, which happen to be some of the highest in Western Europe. And I think they're both indicative of things that are difficult for us. And the same thing applies to things like climate change. I feel like we're very good at seeing the short-term problems. And it's very difficult for us to see long-term ramifications. These decisions that we make, how are they going to affect people 20, 30, 40 years down the line? And make no mistake, they absolutely do. Now they're saying that Ukraine is perhaps the most mined country, one of the most mined countries in the world. Those ramifications are going to be felt for generations. So as we continue to make decisions today and next week, we have to be thinking not about just next year, but what are the grandchildren of people living in Ukraine going to be experiencing as consequences of this war? That's why it's so important to try and get to the peace table as soon as possible, so we can see a way out of this. Because every day that we don't, those ramifications are going to be continued generations into the future.
The cost of rebuilding there is over $400 billion now. I mean, that's more than the Marshall Plan.
Yeah. I mean, obviously a much smaller land mass considering all of Central Europe at the time. But to me, you can find money to help people, and the money that we have spent, in wars, going back to World War II. I mean, it dwarfs what we're going to give. Like, granted, it's a lot more than the Marshall Plan. But to me, this is something that, you cannot put a finger on it. And I just think that this needs to be how Joe Biden comes out and says, look, we needed to protect our friends in the Ukraine that were going to get demolished. But it's now time, to move toward a peaceful settlement. It's also now time to rebuild and utilizing our NATO friends, utilizing our diplomacy corps. And I think this sets him, apart from the Republican Party, who is always about more money for the military-industrial complex. We never say no to that. There's a handful of Trumpies that don't want it, but for the most part. And, to me, this is really critical. And again, I know that Biden has put a lot more money than Trump. But that being said, that's why I think he needs to pivot here. Your thoughts, Brian, then Larry.
Well, it gets back to what Larry said earlier, that many experts are saying that this war cannot be won militarily. I feel like that is not something that has been accepted by the president or his administration yet. Certainly not something that they're saying publicly. They're still seeing the end of this war as a major breakthrough, that they're going to kick Russia out of every inch of Ukrainian territory, and that's how this is going to be resolved. It's going to be resolved through force of arms. I just don't think the evidence is there to support that. So they need to look at a different type of victory. Compared to the predictions when Russia escalated this war and invaded Ukraine in the month of February 2022, everyone was saying Ukraine doesn't stand a chance. They're going to be out of this in 6 weeks. The fact that they've held out this long is a victory in and of itself. The fact that they can force a negotiated settlement when predictions were so dire, even by our own officials at that time, is a victory. I think he needs to redefine it, and then he can take credit for some of the things that he has done. But I think it's a diplomatic victory is what the situation calls for, and I also think it may be the only one that's available, both to the Biden administration and to the people of Ukraine.
Larry, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that the Biden administration recognizes what Brian is saying, but you can't say it publicly because that'll undermine your negotiating position. In other words, you have to say, well, we support the Ukrainian government no matter what. And by and large, that sends a signal to the Russians that they can't win, and so they would be willing to negotiate. But then when it comes time, you got to tell them, okay, this is what you have to do, and this is what you have to settle. So it really is complex. I think everybody recognizes Brian's endgame, no doubt about it. The real question is, how do you get there in a way that makes sense? I mean, they're talking about now, well, we're going to send the F-16s there. Okay, train the pilots. They'll be there in another year. You sure you still want to have this war
goes on and on.
on?
You're right. You got to call a timeout on that part of it. I mean, I heard a report today, I think it was on CNN or someplace, that there is this pressure to use the weapons they have now to sort of end this from the Ukrainian perspective. We'll see if that pressure continues to mount. But I think you should start thinking about diplomacy. And the hints that I would make if I'm Biden now, as you head into 2024, is you got to look at it and say, this is who we are going forward. We have to end things in diplomacy. You don't have to talk about Ukraine. Just talk about it as a general rule of the Biden administration in the second term. We'll be back with our good friends, Larry Korb and Brian Garvey. We'll take a phone call from John in Minnesota as well. It's the Jeff Santos Show, 2 hours. Patrick Claybon coming up after this, little NFL talk and social issues as well after this timeout. It is the Jeff Santos Show. Back in a flash.
You don't have to wait for amazing deals on a new floor. Get spring Black Friday deals right now at Lumber Liquidators Flooring. This week, save up to 35% on gorgeous hardwood and waterproof vinyl floors. Plus, we can arrange for installation by professional, independent contractors. And with special financing, you can get started today. These are the floors homes are built on. Lumber Liquidators Flooring.
The Jeff Santos Show is brought to you by Mass Peace Action. With over 9,000 supporters in the state, MPA uses the power of grassroots organizing to end war, create a more just foreign policy, and cut wasteful Pentagon spending to support the needs of the American people, like healthcare, education, infrastructure, and the environment. 20 years of war is long enough. To become a member or learn more, visit masspeaceaction.org. Don't wish for peace, work for it.
I'm Rich Rosario. 1 in 4 heart attack survivors will have another cardiovascular event. Award-winning author and American Heart Association volunteer Dr. Nisa Goldberg explains the hidden risks.
Many people don't realize that managing hidden risks like untreated high blood pressure, unhealthy eating habits, and poor medication adherence may reduce your risk for having another heart attack.
The American Heart Association's Secondary Heart Attack Prevention Initiative, sponsored by Bayer, reminds you to follow your doctor's recommendations to help reduce your risk factors.
Take your medication as prescribed. Certain medicines like aspirin can lower your risk of another cardiac event. Aspirin is not appropriate for everyone, so be sure to talk to your doctor before you begin an aspirin regimen. It's important to understand your medications and take them correctly. Manage risk factors like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Quit smoking, eat healthier, and get active.
Learn more ways to thrive after a heart attack at heart.org/oneisenough.
Are you living with pain? I was after a nasty fall. I got relief with 1 hour pain relief. I'm Barry Yarconi, president, and here's Lisa, a Marine who was injured in Iraq.
After surviving an explosion, I was on horrible painkillers for lingering head, shoulder, back, and knee pain, but I hated the dangers and side effects. My friend told me about 1 hour pain relief, and now I'm off the drugs.
1 hour pain relief is the result of 15 years of research on an amazing extract from hops, the plant used to flavor beer.
Whether your pain is from an injury or just aging, you get safe, all-day relief in less than 1 hour.
We're so sure you'll love 1 hour pain relief too that we'll send you a 1-week trial for just a small shipping charge. Call 800-269-9500 right now. That's 800-269-9500. There's no gimmicks, no obligation, no automatic shipments. Stop living with pain. Call 800-269-9500 for your 1-week trial or visit onehourpainrelief.com. That's 800-269-9500.
Supporting the middle class. This is the Jeff Santos Show.
"33 minutes past the hour. It is the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into. We're here on Thursdays, once a week here, hoping over the coming weeks to be back in our Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 time period, and hopefully that will happen in the coming weeks. We can give guys like Brian Garvey and Larry Corbin an entire hour, as opposed to this, half here and half there kind of thing. But that's the way we work in independent media, isn't it? We were talking, guys, about the concerns over Ukraine. Another hot spot, and we'll take a call from my good friend John in Minnesota in a minute here, is the issue of the Middle East and Israel and Palestine. There are a lot of concerns about the human rights violations of Palestinians in this situation. It continues. Brian, I feel like, this is something that the administration, I know it's very delicate negotiations because of our relationship with Israel over the years, but you got to be careful that you're not just basically giving Netanyahu whatever he wants. This has to be something that has to be dealt with, and it has to be dealt with both with strength and some diplomacy going forward. Your thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, I feel like the Biden administration is trying to ignore a lot of the concerns that you just expressed, and they're also trying to ignore a lot of human rights violations from Saudi Arabia, not just the ones that have been going on for years, but there's been recent reports from Human Rights Watch that Saudi border guards have been systematically shooting migrants at their southern border, most of them Ethiopians who have fled from, across the Red Sea and through Yemen to the Saudi border. And I think why they're doing that is they're trying to pursue what would be a crown jewel in terms of diplomacy, which is they're trying to get a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And it's a noble goal, but at the same time, it cannot be bought at the price of ignoring all of these human rights violations, both by Israel and Saudi Arabia. So I think the Biden administration may be trying to get a big win in the Middle East, but the way that they're going about it, I think it might be more of an empty victory. I'd love to hear Larry's thoughts on it right now. I hear that the Palestinians may be trying to get some considerations as part of this deal, but I haven't heard the specifics yet. Larry may know more.
Yeah, Larry, I just ask you if you can get concise here because we only have about 4 or 5 minutes left in this segment. So go right ahead.
Okay, yeah, there's no doubt about the fact that they're trying to accomplish a lot. You want the agreement with Saudi Arabia because that stands up against Iran. That's why you're concerned, about that. Similarly, they're concerned about Netanyahu's policies, where he's trying to get rid of the Supreme Court, basically there,
right?
And
exactly.
That's causing a lot of problems in Israel, which is going to make it harder for them to get to deal with Saudi Arabia. And there's no doubt about the fact that Netanyahu has antagonized a lot of his own military people. The reservists don't even want to serve. So I think, Netanyahu's coming to Washington here by the end of this year. And I think the president has to make it clear to him the things that, Brian has talked about here in terms of what our support depends upon. And the same way, you look at Saudi Arabia, where we, turned a blind eye to what MBS has done after Biden criticized them in his campaign. And then he goes over there, and it gets back to the old thing I remember from my basic course in international politics. Nations don't have permanent friends or enemies. They have permanent interests. And if we get the Saudis and Israelis together, that will do a lot for the world global oil market as well as Iran's aggressive behaviors.
Yeah, what will it do, though, to human rights in the region? I want to go to John, and I ask you, John, to be quick on this because we're running out of time. John in Minnesota, you're next with Brian Garvey and Larry Korb here on the Jeff Santos Show.
Yeah, we have several areas to talk about, but, obviously Netanyahu is nothing more than a tin pan dictator. He wants to have absolute control in Israel, get rid of the judiciary, and also he'd like to grind the Palestinians into the dirt. It's a genocide. And it's really unconscionable, considering the history of Israel and how it was developed, that a country like Israel is perpetrating another genocide on another group of people, number one. And then the right to self-determination in Africa. France, ourselves, other countries are grabbing resources, and they're really getting to the point where they want to control their own future no matter what happens. And we are not interested in allowing them to do that along with other countries, and we're interfering like crazy. Financially, we've extracted so many different resources out of Africa in terms of the World Bank and other financial institutions, and they have not been able to take care of their people with health care, build infrastructure. They're paying these huge debts to the Western bankers, whether
there's no doubt.
In Europe or in the United States. So that's all.
Hey, thank you, John. Brian, I'll give you the last word here since we're running out of time. Your thoughts on what John had to say here.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think there's a political dynamic to it as well, because President Biden and his administration is trying to make a deal with MBS and Netanyahu, but we can't forget that these are two figures who certainly have a preference in terms of the 2024 election. They are both big Donald Trump fans, and a lot of what Netanyahu is doing in terms of against democracy, it actually kind of reminds me of some of the moves that that Donald Trump is talking about making. So he shouldn't forget, President Biden, that is, that these are two figures that lead those countries that really don't have his best interests at heart.
Very much a great point, and that's the human rights thing that we talked about with Larry earlier. And to me, that's got to be a worrisome. Guys, we'll do this in September. We appreciate you both, and appreciate the last-second maneuverings too. Tell hello to your dog as well, Larry. We always.
I got him to stop barking.
Fantastic greening going on there in the Korb household. Guys, thank you so much.
I brought this for you.
Yes, thank you. They need it. They've lost 4 in a row, so
certainly do.
We definitely need some help. Guys, thank you so much. Larry Korb, Brian Garvey, the best in the business.
Take care. Happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
All right, we're going to switch from the world of international policy to the world of the NFL. Starts next Thursday. I believe it's the 7th of September with the Chiefs and the Lions, and here to talk about that, and of course all the issues that go along with the NFL. It is a cultural behemoth, and this is why we bring in our great friend. He's a great journalist, first and foremost. He's part of the NFL Network coverage. He is our good friend Patrick Claybon, and he joins us via the telephone from Los Angeles, the home of NFL Network. Patrick, great to have you back. It's been too long.
Great to be here, Jeff, and right back at you. I'm a great journalist and person. Glad to be a part of the show whenever I can be, man.
No, it's fantastic, man. We're going to get into some serious issues as well, take a call or two as well. I must tell you, I am very much looking forward to the season. The fact is that there seems to be, the NFL is promoting, a lot of African-American faces. That is good. This recent comedian doing this script that the NFL is out there. Obviously the star of the show is Patrick Mahomes, if you want to look at it that way. And he, of course, now is celebrating his second Super Bowl championship. Is the attention going to be on Mahomes? Is it going to be this sort of Burrow Mahomes kind of scenario, and who they're going to play? Is it going to be the Niners or the Eagles? Is there a rematch going on with the Philadelphia and Kansas City? How do you look at it? And is there any surprises? It seems like the preseason, nobody really of significance actually played in these games for the most part. A handful of guys did, but you're watching these games and you don't know who's playing. It's number 65, whatever. Your thoughts, Patrick?
Well, yeah, and it depends on the particular coach and team philosophy on who we see in the preseason. I think ultimately, with regards to storylines, of course, at the start of the year, there's so much that goes back to the way that the season ended, and that's always going to be how it is. But the only guarantee for any NFL season is there are surprises. By this time next year, there's going to be a household name that 90% of people in the United States have never heard of. Right? There's going to be guys that come out of nowhere. We saw Geno Smith have a resurgent season, a career season last year to become a top 5 fantasy quarterback out of almost nowhere, where people thought the Seahawks were going to do nothing. And so, it's one of those things where, of course, the tried and true, the superstars, and they're superstars because of what they have accomplished. They're going to get the lion's share of the promotion, the energy, and attention. But the beautiful thing about sports is we do have a scoreboard, and ultimately, the team that executes and is able to have a little bit of luck is going to have a chance to do that come February next year. So just looking forward to it, excited. There's of course some labor circumstances that we're trying to figure out. Some running backs and of course all the players. It's not just running backs that kind of suffer at the hands of the most recent CBA. It's everybody, and people are coming to terms with that. And hopefully Jonathan Taylor is able to get something that he wants to come back and play for the Colts. But I think if you mentioned, a societal, there's so many societal examples that can be gleaned from the NFL. And I think a lot of people working and not necessarily being properly compensated, not able to live the life that they want to live, because essentially they're being exploited. People can look at, a Jonathan Taylor and say, oh, he's a millionaire. Who cares? But they could also glean from that the labor circumstances that affect every worker, especially here in America.
Well, you do. And I mean, not too far from the NFL studios is Hollywood. We've seen SAG after. We had on some folks, some actors that are, that are not, the likes of Ben Affleck or Matt Damon, who are stars in this part of the world where I'm from, or the old timers of Redford and Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. I mean, these folks, have to work from job to job. And some of the movies they go off for a few months, and somebody has to go get a job being a waiter. That's just the way it is, and particularly in expensive cities like New York City and LA. Do you sense that the players, particularly those who are the 52nd, the 53rd player, 53 players on the roster, someone of course on the practice squad, do they understand the labor concerns when you hear about potential action with the UAW against Ford and others, when you see the SAG after, when you see what has happened over the years at Starbucks and Amazon? Is there a connection there that people understand this because they're not that far removed? The NFL compared to other major sports, there's for some particular offensive linemen, those who are not quarterbacks in the star positions of wide receiver, that their time in the NFL may be very short, or as what I think Jerry Glanville once said, the NFL stands for not for long if we keep having these stupid calls against the Oilers at the time. What you're hearing on that?
Well, I think if we go back to the most recent CBA, right, the 2020 CBA, it was in the history of the league, right, in the league's collective bargaining agreement, in terms of the vote, it was the narrowest passage in the history of the league. You had less than 100 votes ultimately determining the course of the next 10 years, right? And so if you look at a high school football player right now that's getting ready to go to their first year of college, maybe they're playing major college football, maybe one day they'll be drafted in the first round, they might play their entire 5-year career and never have an opportunity to come to the negotiating table with regards to the CBA. And so I think that's what football players are up against. Their careers are so short, the game can be so violent. They can go their entire career, in fact most do, and never have a chance to take part in any labor action, any collective labor action, just because of the nature of the game. And so I think a lot of people, in general, football players included, are becoming a little more aware of the labor circumstances here in the time that we live in. But it's unfortunately a whole lot easier for some in certain industries to take action than it is, for example, like Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs led the NFL in rushing, did not necessarily get an offer that he wanted after having a career year. And the only recourse for him is to just play and try to get a little bit that he can. But ultimately, he wasn't going to get that type of money from anybody. And fortunately for people in other situations, they could maybe find another employer. But Josh Jacobs is one of the most talented people in the world at the particular thing that he does. And he could do nothing in this most recent instance.
And the NFLPA, he needs to do more. Look, I give the NFLPA, particularly on the Floyd case, did a lot of good things. And I'm wondering, now, and the breaking news on my monitor here in the studio is that Governor Brian Kemp dismisses GOP calls for special session to impeach DA Fani Willis. This is the African American community of Atlanta, well known. There's a great hip hop community there. There's a great political community going back to John Lewis and so forth. Do the NFL players, understand, the whole issue? Again, I don't want to get into Trump, so much. But the fact is that Trump has called out, and Rudy Giuliani just got, found guilty on the issue of the Freeman and her daughter. I mean, this to me is just racism 101. Wondering what you're hearing about this, and if this is in the back of mind of a lot of athletes, because we're seeing this, people coming after African American leaders. The DA, of course, is African American. You have now an African American senator. There was the whole case of Kemp versus Stacey Abrams, an African American woman running for governor there. And there's a lot of concerns over voter suppression. Anything you're hearing, and we'll take a quick call from a couple of our listeners.
Well, I think, right, especially when it comes to covert as well as overt racism, United States of America, Black people, especially Black athletes, are no stranger to it, recognizing where and when it exists and how it operates. I think the issue comes in where the personal and community power to run counter to that exists. People have seen, Colin Kaepernick is not in the league anymore. People,
that's right.
And I would be one of those people that believe his career ended prematurely, simply for speaking truth to power with regards to certain issues, and teams and ownership and the public wasn't ready to hear that at the time. And so it's a lot of math, right? It's a lot of personal math for somebody to do, just like it is if somebody's working in a warehouse and they're doing 96 hours. They're not allowed to take bathroom breaks. And they want to try to organize, but they don't necessarily know who they can trust, and they can't necessarily trust the United States government to hold corporations accountable, and so they're kind of in a disadvantaged position in order to enact the change that they would like to enact, and so I don't necessarily think that there's a greater awareness now. I think there's more willingness to engage in these discussions and perhaps to try to organize. But players and everybody involved can sense movement and change, and they know it's not particularly always a race-based situation. That they've seen, especially guys that were involved. I know Kenny Stills is heavily involved in protests surrounding the murder of Breonna Taylor. They've seen a Black district attorney, a Black attorney general in the state of Kentucky, and Daniel Cameron. Put on a dog and pony show for reactionary forces in America at the expense of a woman who was murdered while she slept. And so it's, I think people recognize where the power and where the opposition is coming from. It's just a matter of, for players and for everybody in this country, to recognize how they can go about changing that.
No doubt. Talking to Patrick Claiborne of the NFL Network, you can catch him daily on the show, Total Access, and many other shows the NFL Network has, and of course a lot more coming up as the NFL season starts a week from Thursday. Let's go to the phones and stay in Los Angeles, where our next caller is from. Tom in the city of Angels. Go right ahead, Tom. You're next with Patrick Claiborne. Oh, we lost Tom. Okay. Well, let us know who else we have, Jalen, if you can. Okay. Patrick, is there in your mind a point where the NFL will join, a picket line in support of, whether, again, we're talking SAG-AFTRA, or whether we're talking, concerns over, and I'm talking about not just one or two athletes, but quite a bit, to show solidarity. Again, we get the UAW potential action. There's flight attendants that is also involved now. Do you think that would be something that you could get people, out of, their daily practice, to say, look, this is something that supports, I have brothers and sisters, family members in this particular union, and I want to support them?
Yeah, I think we've seen examples of that. I know the MLB PA, the MLS PA, the NBA PA, the NFL PA, all of the sports leagues, especially the NWSL, who's at the forefront of so many of these things, because women's issues are kind of run the full spectrum, right? of exploitation on these things. And so they all came out in support of SAG-AFTRA as well as the WGA. These things, I think, the labor movement in America, at least feeling-wise, is becoming more connected. People are getting more involved. There's more collective action. It's just to that point where people need to start pushing electeds, local electeds, state, national, to provide whatever kind of material support, because enforcement, especially when it comes to union busting movements, enforcement is lacking. The teeth have kind of been removed from enforcement. And so I think that's the next step. But in terms of solidarity and statements and being out on the picket line, we're already there. I think we're already there.
Well, that is a good sign, and I'm glad that is, what you're hearing. I just hope that there is an understanding of, again, I've been saying this for a while, that athletes, entertainers, have a society, the world of hip hop, the world of rock and roll, to be able to state their view. And when they think that things that they don't believe in are acting and hurting people, in my opinion, that's where they need to go. I don't want to ask you who's going to win the Super Bowl because it's too early, but you have anybody that is a kind of a sneaky team to watch at the very least, Patrick?
Well, I of course, I do believe it. It's not just me carrying a company flag and protecting the shield. I think you should watch all of them. I think it's
Okay.
the beauty of sports that
That's
we
true.
have no idea. And there's so many things that can transpire. There's so many calls to be made, so many decisions, but ultimately, somebody's going to hoist that trophy, and everybody else will feel like they had a bad season, which is the unfortunate aspect is, only one team gets to have banquets for the rest of their lives and eat weird chicken and talk to people and carry around a ring. But so much goes into it. We got so many guys that are living their dream. They made the NFL this week, and it's something they'll carry with them for the rest of their
That's a
lives.
good thing.
And I think
All those guys,
hope people,
51st,
especially
52nd, 50th.
When it comes to watching preseason football, I know maybe we're having to pull out our rosters, but every one of those guys that we don't know, their hometown, their family is living an absolute dream through them, and it's one of the best moments of the year for me.
That is a good thing. Patrick Claiborne, NFL Network. Check him out. Thank you, my man. I want to thank Jalen for producing this broadcast. Appreciate it, Mr. Claiborne. And thank you for all listening, folks. Keep on fighting peacefully. My name is Jeff Santos. Right now, it is my time to say, I gotta go.